All right, welcome to the deep dive. This is where we grab the sources you send our way, reports, articles, research, and really dig in to find the key insights.
Exactly. We try to get you informed quickly, maybe with a few surprises along the way.
And today we're looking at a market research report you shared, focusing on, well, a really critical area, the global market for pancreatic cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm. It's a heavy topic, but
Yeah.
understanding the market dynamics is important.
Definitely. And this report gives us a pretty detailed look, market size, growth projections, the different segments, drivers, that sort of thing.
So our mission here is basically to unpack this specific report, understand the landscape it paints, and look at the future trajectory it's suggesting.
And what jumps out right away, based on these numbers at least, is some really significant growth forecast and maybe some unexpected details about where that growth is strongest. Let's get into it.
Okay.
So setting the stage, the report gives us the headline numbers. For 2025, it estimates the global market size for pancreatic cancer treatment at USD 342.8 million.
3.1 billion, roughly.
Yeah.
And that's their estimate for 2025 based on historical data they analyzed from 2021 up to 2024.
Right. And that's the baseline. But the forecast, looking ahead, that's where it gets really interesting. By 2033, this report projects the market will hit USD 166.04.09 million.
Wow. So more than tripling in, what is that, 8 years?
Exactly, which leads to the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, they calculate for 2025 to 2033. It's a pretty striking 16.50%.
16.5% CAGR.
Yeah.
That signals really rapid expansion for a global market.
It's huge. So where is this growth happening? The report breaks it down by region for 2025.
It does. So North America currently holds the biggest slice, over 37%. That's about USD 162.84 million for 2025.
Okay, largest share, but its growth rate.
A little lower than that global average we just mentioned. The report forecasted at 14.3% CAGR. Still strong, but not leading the pack in terms of speed.
Then there's Europe, also a major player, right?
Yeah, over 29% of the market. That's USD 911.41 million. And its growth is projected slightly faster than North America at 14.8%.
Okay, so North America and Europe are the big ones now, but you mentioned growth speed.
Right, and this is where it gets interesting according to the report. While those two are the largest today, the Asia-Pacific region, APAC, is expected to grow the fastest.
Ah, how does its current size compare?
It's close behind Europe, actually, around 24% of the market share, which is USD 754.27 million in 2025. But the CGR forecast,
Yeah.
18.5%.
18.5, that's significantly higher.
Definitely. And then you have the other regions. South America around 3.8%, so USD 119.43 million, growing at 15.5%.
Okay.
The Middle East about 4%, USD 125.71 million, growing at 15.8%. And Africa, small share, roughly 2.2%, USD 69.14 million, but still showing a pretty robust projected CGR of 16.2%.
So the picture emerging from this report is established markets are big and growing steadily, sure, but the real acceleration engines seem to be in regions like APAC and Africa.
That's what the numbers suggest. And the report even drills down into some specific countries, which adds a bit more color, like, well, the U.S., for example. A huge chunk of that North America share, obviously. USD 917.48 million in 2025, growing at 14.1%. The report links that size to its, sophisticated healthcare system.
Makes sense. What about Europe?
Germany stands out there. USD 180.46 million market, growing at 15.0% CAGR. The source cites rising incidence rates as a regional driver.
And in APAC, China must be significant.
Huge. USD 316.79 million, growing at 18.0%. And the report points to improving healthcare infrastructure there.
What about India? I remember seeing that mentioned.
Yeah, India actually gets one of the highest individual KGRs mentioned in the report. They forecast 20.4% growth from a USD 75.43 million market in 2025.
20.4%.
Mm-hmm. And South Korea is strong too, 17.6% linked to rising awareness. Even South Africa, down in Africa, is mentioned with a solid 17.1% CAGR on a smaller raise, about USD 24.34 million.
So this regional data, according to the report, really highlights how things like developing infrastructure, growing awareness, maybe different prevalence patterns are driving faster growth outside those traditionally dominant markets.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a shifting landscape.
Okay, let's switch gears then and look inside the market. How does the report break it down? First, by treatment type, it lists quite a few. Chemo, immunotherapy, hormone therapy, surgery, radiation, targeted therapy.
And the report indicates that chemotherapy is expected to stay the dominant segment among those.
Any reason why? What does the source say?
Well, it puts it down to a few things. Growing incidence of pancreatic cancer, naturally, but also ongoing improvements in the chemo drugs themselves, and just a lot of research activity. Major pharma companies focusing R&D there.
Right. They even mentioned some specific drugs, didn't they?
They did. Onivide, Thaloda, cisplatin, Taxol, Taxotere, Abraxane kind of highlights the range of options driving that chemo dominance.
Okay, so chemo is the biggest piece of the pie. But what about the fastest growing piece? Does the report identify one?
It does, and it's radiation therapy.
Radiation. Okay, why is that one accelerating?
Well, the source explains its uses are expanding. It uses high-energy X-rays, to destroy cancer cells. But it's not just for shrinking tumors before surgery anymore.
Oh,
It's also used more after surgery to cut the risk of recurrence, for managing symptoms, and it's advised earlier on sometimes to prevent spread. So these broadening applications are fueling its faster growth compared to other types, according to this report.
interesting dynamic. Okay, let's look at another segmentation. Indication type. The report splits it into exocrine and endocrine pancreatic cancers.
Right, and exocrine is by far the dominant type here. This is the cancer starting in the cells that make digestive enzymes. It's the most common form.
And the report connects that dominance to risk factors.
Directly. Things like cystic fibrosis, diabetes, certain GI procedures, lifestyle stuff like high sugar or alcohol intake, chronic pancreatitis. These are increasingly common issues,
Yeah.
and the report says they directly drive demand for treating exocrine cancers.
So prevalence drives dominance there. What about the endocrine type?
That's identified as the fast-growing segment, even though it's less common overall,
Okay. Where does that type start?
in the hormone-producing cells. And the source suggests its growth is linked to a rise in endocrine pancreatic disorders generally.
And does it link that to anything?
Yeah, it specifically connects it to the global rise in lifestyle diseases like diabetes and obesity, metabolic syndromes, genetic factors too. All these are apparently increasing the need for treatments targeting endocrine tumors, driving that segment's faster growth rate.
Right, I see. Okay, final segmentation the report looks at. End user outlook. Where are patients actually getting treated? Hospitals, oncology clinics, and others.
And hospitals hold the largest market share here. The report's reasoning is pretty straightforward. Hospitals offer comprehensive care. They can do surgery, chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, targeted treatments, all under one roof, essentially.
Plus, the report mentions things like clinical trials happening there, qualified staff, inpatient facilities, post-treatment monitoring.
Exactly. And investments hospitals make in specialized oncology units also bolster their leading position.
But similar to the treatment types, is there a fastest growing end user segment?
Yes, and mirroring the radiation therapy trend, it's oncology clinics identified as the fastest growing segment.
Okay, why are they gaining ground so quickly?
The report suggests it's because they offer a different kind of setting, maybe more individualized, often more accessible. They frequently have cutting-edge equipment focused on specific treatments like immunotherapy or chemo,
Right.
and the source points to other advantages fueling their growth, potentially lower costs for some treatments compared to hospitals, shorter wait times, better continuity of care in that focused setting.
So as awareness and demand for specialized care rise, especially in cities, these clinics become more popular.
That's the argument in the report, yeah. They're becoming a preferred option for many, driving their expansion. And then others is mostly things like research institutes.
Okay, that gives us a good look inside the market segments. Now, what about the bigger picture forces? The report talks about drivers, restraints, and trends shaping this whole market.
It does. It lists three main market drivers. First, the growing aging population globally, right? Older populations generally mean higher cancer incidence.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, just the increasing prevalence of cancer overall, which obviously boosts demand for treatments like these.
Right.
And third, increasing investment in healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah.
So better facilities, more capacity to treat. These things together are expanding the patient pool and the ability to treat them, according to the source.
But it's not all smooth sailing. The report also flags some market restraints, things holding growth back.
Yeah, two key ones. First, the high cost. Many of these advanced treatments are very expensive, which can be a major barrier to access and limit how fast the market can actually grow.
That's a big one.
And the second,
A lack of skilled healthcare professionals, and in some regions, just insufficient healthcare infrastructure. And that ties back to what we saw with the regional growth differences, right? Those gaps in infrastructure and personnel are likely why some regions have lower growth despite potential need.
precisely. The report identifies addressing those as key to unlocking potential.
Okay, drivers and restraints. What about market trends?
Two main ones highlighted. First, rising investment in developing advanced technologies for treatment. Lots of innovation happening.
And second,
An increase in the number of emerging markets showing significant growth potential, which again lines up with those APAC and Africa figures we discussed earlier.
so the trends suggest a future driven by new tech and expanding geographical reach.
That seems to be the direction the report points towards.
Okay, nearly there. To round out this deep dive into the report, let's touch on the competitive landscape. How does the source describe it?
It calls the market highly competitive. You've got a mix of big global corporations and smaller regional players all involved.
And it lists some key companies.
Yeah, quite a few familiar names. Pfizer, Novartis, Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers Squibb, Zydus Cadila, Myriad Genetics, Roche F. Hoffman La Roche, Pharmacyte Biotech, Cava, AstraZeneca, Novocure.
A lot of the big pharma players. The report notes they tend to dominate.
It does. And the reasons given are pretty standard for these kinds of markets. They have extensive product portfolios already, strong global distribution networks, and a heavy focus on R&D and innovation.
Does the source give any specific examples of recent competitive moves?
It gives a couple. For instance, it mentions Novartis getting U.S. FDA orphan drug designation for their drug NIS 793 back in January 2022.
Right, orphan drug designation, that's for rare diseases, helps encourage development. Pancreatic cancer falls into that category, so that was a notable step for Novartis.
Exactly. And another example the report cites is a collaboration between Roche and Novocure started in September 2021. They're working on developing something called tumor treating fields, or TT fields.
T field.
Yeah, it's a non-invasive approach using electric fields to disrupt cancer cell division. They're developing it in combination with Roche's immunotherapy drug, atezolizumab, specifically for metastatic pancreatic cancer.
Interesting. So those examples from the report kind of illustrate the activity both improving existing approaches like chemo augmentation, which Novartis's drug aims for, and pursuing innovative new therapies like TT fields with immunotherapy. Shows how dynamic the competition is.
Right. It gives a snapshot of recent developments from the report's perspective.
Okay, I think we've really unpacked this market research report now. We've seen, based purely on this source, that the global pancreatic cancer treatment market is substantial already and projected to grow incredibly fast. That 16% plus CAGR, leading to a potential tripling by 2033, is quite something.
And we saw the regional story. North America and Europe are the current leaders in size, but the report points to APAC and Africa as the hotspots for future growth, driven by factors like infrastructure improvements in China or high growth rates forecast for India.
And we looked inside the market segments based on the report's analysis. Chemotherapy is dominant, but radiation therapy is the fastest grower. Exocrine cancer is most prevalent, but endocrine is growing faster. Hospitals are the main end user, but oncology clinics are rapidly gaining share.
And we covered those broader forces the report identified. The drivers like aging populations and infrastructure investment pushing growth, the restraints like high costs and staffing shortages holding it back in places, and the key trends towards advanced tech and emerging markets.
And just to reiterate, this whole deep dive was focused only on the information within the specific market research report you provided. It gives you that focused view based on their data and analysis.
Yeah. And stepping back for a final thought, based on what this report lays out, that projection of over 16% annual growth, a talk of rising investment in advanced technologies, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? It raises a question for you, the listener, to ponder.
What might the actual experience of pancreatic cancer treatment look like for patients by 2033? Beyond just market dollars, how could this growth and tech advancement potentially change things on the ground? And what challenges or opportunities does this rapid expansion signal for healthcare systems trying to deliver that care effectively around the world?
Something to think about as you process this deep dive.